Hello, readers by eyes and by ears. This is Mari Chan, and welcome to my channel. You guys, I am exhausted. This weekend has been terribly busy with the move, but we are settled in now. I'm so happy. And now I just focus on making this place a home and getting rid of all the boxes. But nevertheless, I am ready to start the final volume of Yu. This is Remnants of Filth, Volume 7, and we've got 7 chapters before we get to the extra, which is weird because it says extra, Dream of Youth, and that's the only extra, and it's split into 18 chapters, but it's one extra, which is weird. Dream of Youth, what's that about? Like them being young? I hope the extras is not just them being young. Anyway, let's get started. Hope you all enjoy. Chapter 190, Before the Flower Broke the Darkness. This convoluted tale began when Hua Poan first learned his own identity. Jiang Fuli's voice was brittle as crushed jade as he recounted those events from many centuries past. Hundreds of years ago, Hua Poan had been a slave in the academy. Even then, his personality was unyielding, and he refused to bow to the rules. Other slaves accepted their fate from the moment they were born, but when Hua Poan saw those noble young masters in their splendid coats of brocade and plush furs, he had always silently asked himself, why wasn't he the one to enjoy such luxuries? Why was he born into poverty, while others wanted for nothing from the very first breath they drew? As he grew older, Hua Poan's wild nature had become harder and harder to tame. He began to cultivate in secret. He discovered he could master in a day techniques those noble children couldn't manage in weeks or months. In time, he discovered the reason behind his extraordinary talent. When Chonghua was founded, his own ancestor had been a step away from becoming emperor, but because his brother schemed against him, he had suffered a grievous defeat and lost everything. At that moment, Hua Poan realized with a start that this was what people meant when they said history was written by the victors. If his ancestors hadn't been so soft-hearted, if he had killed his brother first, then wouldn't Hua Poan be the one living in fathomless glory today? Wouldn't he be someone who trampled carelessly over servants and slaves? He, Hua Poan, was not a slave. He had missed the throne by the thinnest of margins. After learning these truths, Hua Poan felt no more doubt in his heart when he looked at the noble young masters. He felt only hatred, scorn, and ridicule. He gazed upon those useless aristocrats with the eyes of a falcon, watching as those middling idiots tried and failed to reach heights he'd cleared with ease. His glory had been stolen from him, and his heart filled with a loathing that flourished like weeds. But Hua Poan was a clever man. He understood that rash use of brute force would end with his severed head rolling upon the ground. Even after he learned of his lineage, he feigned ignorance of it, pretending to be helpless and pitiable. He slithered like a snake through the underbrush, peering furtively at the grass rustling in the breeze. He hoped to find a legitimate opportunity to show himself before the emperor. Thus, he slowly constructed the stairs that would take him up through the ranks. The first step he placed his foot upon was the Academy's purest and kindest grandmaster, Chun Tang, Preceptor Chun. Hua Poan made a point of coming before Chun Tang from time to time, leaving the man with the impression that the slave was obedient and sensible. When the right moment arrived, he staged losing control of his spiritual core and managed to secure Chun Tang's compassion through a lie, just as expected. I've reported this incident to His Imperial Majesty and made an exception to take you as a disciple, Chun Tang told him gently. Focus on resting. Once you recover, you may learn from me and move through the academy as you please. Hua Poan's first risky move had paid off. Of course, that tender-hearted idiot Chun Tang didn't disappoint. From then on, Hua Poan exploited Chun Tang's compassion, putting on a lovable and docile act by his side. As the days wore on, he successfully placed piece after piece on the chessboard of his ambitions, drawing ever nearer to realizing his goals. Still, it was not as if he never felt guilt. As he yearned to reach the upper echelons of power, he cultivated with rash abandon. Once, after he fell unconscious from a high fever, he woke to find Chun Tong sitting wearily at the desk, cheek propped on his palm as he slept fitfully, a bowl of medicine ready by his hand. As he'd gazed upon Chun Tong's weary, elegant profile, Hua Puan's heart had indeed ached. He hadn't failed to notice the things Chun Tong had done for him throughout the years. He noticed how Chun Tong patiently taught him and guided him without a care for others' criticisms. He watched Chun Tong argue that slave-born people were as innately kind as anyone else, that there was nothing they couldn't be taught. He'd walked beneath Chun Tong's umbrella, eaten the rice porridge Chun Tong cooked him, and used the healing salve Chun Tong gifted him. His Shizun had never remotely mistreated him because of his status. He gave him a name, Hua Puan, signifying that even in the dead of night, a flower could bloom and break the darkness. Hua Puan had called him Shizun with feigned regard in the beginning, but by the end, his sincerity was real. Unfortunately, Hua Puan's grudges and ambitions overruled all else. His sincerity changed nothing. He knew Chun Tong's clan was unfailingly loyal to the emperor. In fact, this clan had been foremost among the families who had once overthrown his ancestor. Was this karmic retribution, or simply reaping what they had sown? For all his guilt, Hua Puan stayed his course. He pried into Chun Tong's secret techniques and furtively studied those forbidden black magic arts that everyone despised. He altered every single bright and honorable spell Chun Tong taught him, twisting them into dark and malevolent techniques. He raised an army and rebelled, hoping to overturn the imperial court of Chonghua. He led hundreds of thousands of troops and the demon blood beast Jing Chun to besiege his motherland. He marched forth, aglow with excitement and arrogance. He pictured how the nation would fall to its knees when he took the city, how the people would bow down before him, the slave no one had found worthy, and beg pathetically for their lives to be spared. How very satisfying this would be. Would he allow them to live or doom them to die? Hua Puan didn't care to think that far ahead. To him, these people were as significant as dead grass left in the fields at the end of autumn. They were beneath his consideration. There was only one person whose fate he'd turned over again and again in the depths of his mind, unable to decide how he ought to dispose of him. That person was none other than the first step he'd used in his ascension, his benevolent teacher, Chun Tong. Would he reduce him to a commoner? No, that would be no fun. Let him continue teaching at the academy? Much too boring. Snap all the tendons in his limbs and throw him in prison? But why? After all, Chun Tong had shown him nothing but kindness. Hua Puan had no grudges against him. Why would he lock him up? And yet, whenever that last thought crossed his mind, Hua Puan felt a strange thrill, one that made him lick his lips as his eyes lit up. He didn't know the meaning of this impulse, but he had a vague inkling that a large part of his satisfaction in conquering Chonghua would come from the power he would wield over Preceptor Chun. He could control him, punish him, defile him. His pupils contracted slightly, joy shining from his bold and youthful face. Hua Puan had plotted out the conclusion to this game of chess thousands of times, but never once had he anticipated that Chun Tong would die. Yet as Hua Puan looked on, Chun Tong had raised his hands, the same hands that had once wiped Hua Puan's fevered brow and snuffed out the life of his cherished demon blood beast. With the same eyes that had once gazed warmly at him, Chun Tong fixed him with a cold stare. In that voice that had once patiently explained a difficult spell, Chun Tong spoke with a sharp viciousness. "It's over. Hua Puan, your ambition ends here." He was a schemer filled with wild ambition. He'd never put much stock in sentiment, but after Chun Tong's death, his sanity frayed, and his appetites grew increasingly depraved. It was fortunate that when Chun Tong sacrificed himself to kill the demon blood beast, he did not utter the words, "I regret ever taking you on as a disciple." Perhaps he had no opportunity before death claimed him. But it was a great stroke of luck nevertheless. Hua Po might have gone even more insane otherwise. He was already crazy enough. Chun Tong perished, the demon blood beast was sealed, and the Liao Kingdom's army was defeated. Everyone knew the conclusion to that great battle. What they did not know was that, after Hua Po retreated with his troops to Liao, hatred and discontent roiled in his chest, joined by an anguish he was unwilling to acknowledge. In this state of turmoil, he gathered all the soul-summoning methods in the 9 provinces and summoned a fragment of Chun Tong's departed soul. He was seized by a frantic need to ask Chun Tong a question. Why did he go to such lengths? Wasn't every emperor more or less the same? Why couldn't he, Hua Po sit upon that throne? Even if he'd killed everyone upon taking the city, he would have spared Chun Tong. Why was it Chun Tong who had to die? The singular person he wanted to keep alive had perished with the demon beast to save the same useless masses Hua Po wished to cut down like weeds. Over and over again, using all sorts of spells, he attempted to piece together the remaining scraps of Chun Tong's soul. With each failure, the hatred in his heart festered by degrees. Chun Tong was indeed a lapdog of Chonghua's emperor, Hua Po thought. He had foiled Hua Po's revolt, and now he wanted to destroy his heart as well. Tormenting him like this was his retaliation, was it not? Still, Hua Po was undeterred. No one could turn him from his course. Finally, there came a day when he captured one of Chun Tong's cousins. Using this blood connection, he succeeded with a soul-summoning method that had previously failed. Hua Po triumphantly poured Chun Tong's soul into that living body and revived Preceptor Chun. Deep within the Liao Palace, within a golden bed canopy, countless thoughts had surged through Hua Po's mind as he faced the man he'd lost and regained, his teacher who had died and been resurrected. But what he did was something even he himself hadn't expected. He plundered Chun Tong's newly awakened body. It seemed a cruel joke. He had gone to such pains to bring a dead man back to life solely for the pleasure he could get out of his body? Yet that night, he devoured without restraint the man he'd snatched up from the depths of the underworld, like a traveler dying of thirst drinking from a sweet spring. When the exhausted Preceptor Chun passed out, Hua Po held him, gazing at the pale tears of humiliation that had gathered in the corners of his eyes. Forget it, he thought. He no longer wanted to ask. He no longer wanted to ask Chun Tong why he had sacrificed himself with the demon blood beast, why he had died for the sake of his country. None of it mattered anymore. It was all in the past. At that moment, Hua Po felt a profound sense of peace, as though he'd always yearned to have Chun Tong like this, and had finally awoken to his desire today. At last, he was satisfied. But he was the only one who felt satisfaction. Chun Tong, whom he'd hauled out of death, lived in horrific agony, facing the consequences of his own actions every single day. He was a once powerful man, yet he had no choice but to lie beneath his own disciple in submission. He was trapped in a cage, and the people in the world who knew he was still alive could be counted on a single hand. His greatest source of terror was the fact that he had no idea when these days would end. After Hua Po resurrected him, he lost interest in conquering more lands and fervently turned his attention to the arts of immortality, as if he wished to keep living like this for centuries. Hua Po would not give him a chance to die again. In all absurdity, having experienced Chun Tong's previous death, Hua Po mad whims only grew madder. He believed Chun Tong chose to die with the demon blood beast because he cared too much for the lives of those irrelevant people. Chun Tong, he thought, should never care for others ever again. To this end, he devised all sorts of ghastly methods to sunder what connections Chun Tong retained with the outside world, one after another. He concocted medicines that made him forget his family and devised poisonous curses that excised all his fond feelings. There was nothing he wouldn't put to use. When he discovered a dark art that could sever Chun Tong's fated connections with every cycle of reincarnation to come, he gleefully cast the curse. No more would his teacher form bonds of marriage, family, or friendship. Only after Hua Po had ensured Chun Tang would live beneath a lonely star forevermore did he feel at ease. Only then could he be certain Chun Tang wouldn't ever sacrifice his life for someone else again. But perhaps because the trace of Chun Tang's innate goodness still remained, or because he so stubbornly refused to surrender, the Liao Kingdom's high priestess, who was in charge of his care in the palace, fell for him in tender-hearted love. This priestess was none other than Su Yu-ro. Oh. Throughout the years, she saw Chun Tang struggling as he tried to resist Hua Po-an's malevolent spells, saw him subjected to suffering that defied the will of heaven, saw him forced to live a life worse than death. She admired his strength, but increasingly struggled to witness his plight in silence. One day, she decided to act. While Hua Po-an was away on a long campaign in the northwest, she took Chun Tang and fled the palace. After fighting their way through myriad dangers and obstacles, the two of them finally escaped the borders of the Liao Kingdom. Her aid wasn't purely selfless. She had fallen in love with Chun Tang and intended to marry him. But Chun Tang's fated bonds had been irreversibly severed by Hua Po-an. All of Su Yu-ro's efforts and sincerity were in vain. And more critically, the torture and dark spells Chun Tang had been subjected to at Hua Po-an's hands continued to scramble his memories and deepen his pain. Su Yu-ro couldn't bear to see him suffer so grievously. She therefore made a decision. Before she'd fled the palace, Su Yu-ro had stolen one of the more precious treasures of the Liao Kingdom, an ancient heirloom Hua Po-an had taken from the Chun clan, the holy artifact called the Reversal Stone. It had long been said this stone was capable of changing the past, but Chun Tang's clan had only guarded it, never putting it to use. Hua Po-an had tried to pry its secrets from Chun Tang's lips to no avail. Regardless, immense power resided within this stone. Enough, Su Yu-ro believed, to alter the course of fate. She created an array with the stone in its center, casting a spell that sealed away all of Chun Tang's memories and curses, thus giving him a new life. Preceptor Chun disappeared, and the man who rose from the sickbed was Jiang Fu Li. Spells cast with the reversal stone carried a heavy price. The backlash devoured half of Su Yu-ro's lovely face. One half retained its peerless beauty, while the other became warped and demonic. She had no choice but to hide her face behind a veil from then on. When she had finished, she secretly embedded the reversal stone in Jiang Fu Li's left eye. The stone had a unique property. It absorbed spiritual energy from the surrounding world each night and entered a temporary resting state. This was the reason Jiang Fu Li couldn't see clearly through his left eye after nightfall. Su Yu-ro and Jiang Fu Li continued to travel as a pair. Gradually, Su Yu-ro discovered the terrifying depth of the mark Hua Po-an had left on Chun Tang's mind. Jiang Fu Li barely remembered anything from before the reversal stone spell, but every so often he'd ask without warning, "Did I once have a lovable and clever little disciple?" One balmy afternoon, when the peach blossoms were first beginning to bloom, Jiang Fu Li sat by the window and silently copied out a sword manual. "What are you working on?" Su Yu-ro asked curiously. Jiang Fu Li was placid and mostly affectless. Such was his usual demeanor after being sealed by the reversal stone. He often reminded her of a walking corpse, yet this was the only way he could live in relative ease, rather than being trapped in sleepless agony. "I don't know either," he said. "This just came to mind, so I scribbled it down. They look like decent sword forms." A closer look left her speechless. It was the water-parting sword manual. These were the sword forms Hua Po-an had most favored when he practiced in the Liao Palace. A sword of 5 years turns the seasons. A sword of 10 years turns back time. This sword's edge sharp enough to part the waters. This life too short to part my heart from yours. This water-parting sword was the first set of sword forms Chun Tang had taught Hua Po-an after taking him as a student. Chun Tang had reportedly developed them specifically for Hua Po-an's martial strengths and weaknesses. Whenever Hua Po-an had spoken of this, his face had become suffused with crazed glee, though sorrow still lurked in the shadows. Hua Po-an had later learned countless formidable sword techniques. The water-parting sword was by no means the strongest. Chun Tang, too, had developed many excellent techniques in his life. The water-parting sword was hardly his most noteworthy creation. And yet, despite having lost all of his memories, Jiang Fuli still had the ability to serenely write out each of the sword forms. As Su Yizhou watched his brush move across the paper, she didn't know what to feel. Jiang Fuli looked up. "What is it? Do you know the origin of this sword manual?" She lowered her lashes in panic. "No, I don't know either." The two of them hid in the depths of a nameless forest in the mountains for many years. In the palace of Liao, Hua had studied the forbidden techniques of immortality and dosed both Jiang Fuli and Su Yizhou with those arcane medicines. In order to let Jiang Fuli rest and recover, and because she was afraid of Hua chasing them down, Su Yizhou concealed them within a barrier. As the years slipped by, she lost track of events in the outside world. By the time she felt it was time to venture out of the mountains and speak to others, centuries had passed. She realized with some astonishment that Hua secret forays into immortality had actually succeeded. Upon asking the state of each country, she learned that many small nations had fallen and been replaced, and that Chonghua had been several generations of rulers. As for the Liao kingdom, its ruler Hua had been too hasty in seeking immortality and conducted black magic experiments on a large scale, making many enemies. In the end, his work backfired. He died of spell backlash after he was attacked by assassins. The Liao kingdom had since had quite a few different rulers, but their king was a puppet. The real monarch was the Guo of the Liao kingdom who hid in the shadows. When Su Yizhou learned of this, she couldn't help sighing in relief. She and Jiang Fuli could finally return to the mortal world without worrying that Hua would find them. Still, she felt a faint trepidation. The tales of that mysterious Guo stirred in her a vague sense of familiarity and foreboding. A few years later, she found evidence for her unease. She and Jiang Fuli had been in seclusion for hundreds of years, cultivating healing arts in the remote mountains. Upon re-entering civilization, the two of them roamed across the realm, familiarizing themselves with the world at present while saving many innocent commoners caught in the fires of war. On one occasion, they passed through a little village in Lichun, where they came upon a massacre committed by Liao Kingdom cultivators. There, Jiang Fuli rescued two orphans from certain death. The older one had clutched at his younger brother, begging the masked Jiang Fuli to take them in. Wait, okay. Jiang Fuli's memories and emotions were sealed away. Nothing should have shaken him. But as he stared at the young boy kneeling before him that day, he did something Su Yizhou never expected. He produced that handwritten water-parting sword manual and gave it to that youth. "There's not much point in me keeping this sword manual. Its techniques are too weak. But if you learn it well, you might be able to use it as the foundation for some of your own sword methods. It'll be enough to keep yourself safe." After they returned, Su Yizhou asked him why he'd done it. "I don't know," Jiang Fuli had said, absent-mindedly grinding medicine. "The way he looked when he knelt and begged me for help seemed familiar somehow." Su Yizhou felt a twinge of alarm. "Yes, someone once kneeled before you like this, hundreds of years ago, in the Academy of Chonghua. A young slave with ravenous ambition knelt pathetically before you and begged you to save him, and you spared his life." Su Yizhou said none of this out loud, but she raised her eyes to the hazy gray of the sky. It was the rainy season. Faint flashes of lightning brandished their claws behind the dark clouds. It was about to storm again. The Liao Kingdom's murderous pursuit found them without warning a few years after Jiang Fuli gave away the water-parting sword manual. Su Yizhou and Jiang Fuli fled in panic, managing to escape several attempts at capture by the skin of their teeth. After the most dangerous attack yet, Su Yizhou knew they could no longer wander as they pleased in these small countries. They had to take shelter in a nation that was sufficiently powerful. She brought Jiang Fuli back to Chonghua. In the centuries since they had last known it, Chonghua had undergone tremendous change. No one realized Jiang Fuli's identity, and Jiang Fuli himself likewise remained in the dark. Although they appeared to settle down, Su Yizhou was still troubled by the Liao Kingdom's interest in them. Again and again, she felt Hua An's predatory gaze trained on her back. But how could that be? Hua Puan was dead. Even if he wasn't, why had he suddenly decided to target the undercover Jiang Fuli? Intuition made her wary. To test her suspicions, and also to allow them to properly establish their residence in Chonghua, Shee and Jiang Fuli held a flamboyant wedding a few months later. In all honesty, it was just for show. Jiang Fuli's emotions had been erased and his desires eliminated. His fated bonds had been severed. Any marriage would be one in name only. Nevertheless, the news spread. On the day of the wedding feast, Su Yuzhou purposefully revealed the unmarred half of her face, showing off her ethereal looks and the teardrop-shaped mole by her eye. She waited for the Liao kingdom's reaction. The outcome was more terrifying than she could have imagined. The Guoshu of the Liao kingdom suddenly began seeking women who looked like Su Yuzhou. He invited them to the palace to become priestesses, only to dress them all up as brides and slaughter them. Unfortunately, the youth to whom Jiang Fuli had gifted the sword manual was drawn in as well. In the end, he was refined into a sword spirit and returned to Chonghua to make trouble. It was all so unthinkable. The tale that spread made sense to outsiders. The Guoshu of the Liao kingdom had once loved a peerlessly beautiful priestess. He held a venomous grudge over her betrayal, and so married countless women who resembled her and had them slaughtered as proof of his scorn. Even the sword spirit Li Qingtian believed this was the truth. The priestess was thought to be a calamitous beauty, possessed of such exquisite features that she drove the Guoshu to madness. Only Su Yuzhou herself knew it wasn't so. Hua Puan, she believed, had never died. Perhaps he had been severely wounded in the attack all those years ago and had staged his death to avoid those who would seek revenge upon him. Perhaps he had been hiding in the Liao palace all these years under the guise of the Guoshu, puppeteering the rules of the Liao kingdom for centuries. It was the water-parting sword manual Jiang Fuli had given to Li Qingtian that had revealed his identity. Li Qingtian had trained for years to manage a few of the forms outlined in its pages. Hua Puan, who had never given up looking for Chuntong, took notice. He had methodically followed the clues and planted a target on Jiang Fuli. On the day the sword demon went berserk, when Su Yuzhou had walked toward him and brought his obsession crashing down with a single look at her unveiled face and a few spoken words, it was because she knew he had misunderstood. Li Qingtian had believed his beloved Hong Shao was killed because she looked like the woman the Guoshu loved, but this was far from the truth. The true source of the Guoshu's fury was his belief that Chuntong's curse had been broken over the centuries, so that he could finally get married and form ties of affection with someone else. The Guoshu believed that Su Yuzhou, as a beautiful woman who had accompanied Chuntong for hundreds of years, had finally won his heart. The Guoshu's massacre of the brides on Maiden's Lament Mountain wasn't an attempt to gather reflections of his lover from all over the realm. Instead, he was arrogantly sending Chuntong a warning. Look, the woman you married is nothing special. I can have as many of her as I'd like. You like her type? I'll take all of them into my hands and crush them underfoot. The woman you love, and those bitches who resemble her, will die horrible deaths. I can't break all of your predestined bonds, so this will be the curse I place on you. The face Su Yuzhou showed Li Qingtian was not one of breathtaking beauty. Only half of her loveliness remained, while the other half resembled a ghoul's horrifying features. She told him, Li Qingtian, the man who saved you back in Lichuan is the real object of the Liao Kingdom's Guoshu's long-standing obsession. You've misunderstood. It was never me. The reason the Guoshu went crazy is because of the man who once gave you the water-parting sword manual, Jiang Fuli. The events of the past had been fully recounted. The side room where Jiang Fuli had brought Morsi was dead silent. Morsi sat, pale-faced, and gazed at the man across the table. The man who had recovered his memories via the power of a sacred tree. The man whose seal of his own emotions had been lifted and had no idea what to say. He understood the predicament Jiang Fuli found himself in. Who exactly was Medicine Master Jiang? A living person? A puppet? He was, in some ways, Chuntong from centuries ago, but he wasn't that man entirely. He'd lived as Jiang Fuli for such a great length of time, but he'd always been alone, devoid of desires or passion. Hundreds of years had passed in the blink of an eye, yet he'd lived without enjoyment or meaning until now. Jiang Fuli stroked the reversal stone. Using this, Yuzhou sealed off my emotions and desires, as well as all my memories, he said mildly. Having now removed it of my own volition, I bestow upon you this spiritual stone that generations of Chun Tong's family have guarded. According to the hexagram I divined by the sacred tree, the only way to bring this all to an end is for you to activate it yourself. Shizun, I am willing to face Hua Po An in one last duel. He is Chun Tong's disciple, and I ought to be his executioner. But the expansion of the demon blood beast's blood pool is not something I can stop. Only the reversal stone has that power. Footnote number 1 for the hexagram. This is a form of fortune-telling based on 64 hexagrams defined in the Book of Changes. A hexagram is 6 lines, each of which can be yin or yang. Divination usually involves tossing yarrow stalks or coins. He picked up the black crystal, its inky darkness setting off the paleness of his fingers. The spiritual stone is the only one of its kind in all the 9 provinces. It was one of the energy stones Shee used when creating the 3 forbidden techniques, handed down from primordial times. Once activated, it can open a rift in space-time, allowing the barrier to return to the past. Morsi's face was ashen. You're talking about the space-time gate of life and death. No, replied Jiang Fuli. The reversal stone comes from the realm of the gods. It's a spiritual stone Shee brought to Earth. It long precedes the space-time gate and isn't as strong as that forbidden technique. It can return you 10 years in the past at most, and no further. If the records are to be believed, any spellcaster who attempts the space-time gate is doomed to a tragic demise, and its working places the mortal world in jeopardy of utter annihilation. But the reversal stone is different. How is it different? There is no curse associated with it. Most of the records describing its use have been muddled by the passage of time. The old writings of Chun Tong's clan report that it can reflect the soul and spirit and see into one's heart, and that it inflicts no harm upon the world, as fate has already been written. But no one is sure of the exact meaning of these words. The people of Chun Tong's family only knew it cannot be used at will. One must ask the heavens and divine a hexagram before it can be handed to someone for their use. Otherwise, the consequences might be more devastating than the space-time gate of life and death. The candles in the room flickered silently. A moth threw itself into the lamp and exploded with a crackle. Morsi gazed into the crystal. Jiang Fuli pushed the stone toward him. The hexagram said to give this to you. Activated and returned to the day Goo Mahng was sent back to Chonghua as a gift of peace. Back to the Fushui riverbank, before Muzhong Lian met with him. Whoa. Morsi's heart began to race, blood thundering in his ears. The Liao kingdom hadn't taken all Goo Mangg's memories. It was Muzhong Lian who had ruined Goo Mangg's mind, on orders from the emperor, when he'd come to take the soul box Goo Mahng forged to contain the power of the demon blood beast, which was to say, if he returned to that day, before Muzhong Lian arrived, he could... His head jerked up. He met Jiang Fuli's eyes. Jiang Fuli nodded. If you destroy the source of the demon blood beast's energy in the past, there will be no chance that the demon blood beast can be reborn in the present. If all things go well, it could change the fates of many. You might have the chance to preserve Goo Mangg's mind and immediately exonerate him. Maybe Muzhong Chuyi wouldn't need to die, and Hua Po An wouldn't be able to reawaken his loyal servant. Jiang Fuli hesitated. I cannot guarantee that the changes will all be for the better. The reversal stone's effects don't last very long, no more than 2 hours. Upon your return, the situation will have changed entirely. Only you, the stone's wielder, will remember the past as it was. As for everyone else, you will witness a different future for them. You might return to find Yue Chengqing with a completely altered temperament, or you find that Muzhong Chun came to his senses and wasn't forced to abdicate. Maybe he will still be ruler of this nation. You might discover that I've become completely different. The change you work in the past may create an entirely different Chonghua. But Shizun. Jiang Fuli looked out the window and into the distance, where blood was swallowing the earth and the sky had been clouded by smoke. Perhaps no other conclusion could be worse than the present. Since the sacred tree has divined it, we shall take the risk. You will use the reversal stone to return to the past. At the same time, I'll go to the Liao Kingdom encampment to look for Hua Poan and keep him from trying to stop you." He produced an exquisitely crafted little brocade sachet and placed the reversal stone within it, fastening it to Morsi's belt. "There's only one stone. We have just this one chance, and no precedent to guide us. Let me know when you are ready to begin." Jiang Fuli cast a glance at Morsi with his remaining eye, but Morsi was lost in thought, gazing at the roiling expanse of scarlet outside. His Chonghua, his beloved, their youth, their family, their home. They might all be granted a chance to start over. "There's also a possibility that you may die in the attempt," Jiang Fuli said at last. "No one knows." Morsi glanced at the blood pool in which Goo Mahng lost his life, then brought his gaze back to Jiang Fuli. "I'm ready." The copper bells outside the window chimed in the breeze. They were staking everything on this final gamble before the coming dawn. Only by taking the correct steps would Chonghua survive to welcome daybreak. At this point, what did it matter if he lived or died? Morsi was completely alone. There was no one he couldn't bear to leave. He gazed at Jiang Fuli's remaining eye. Hundreds of years ago, eyes like this had gazed tenderly at the young Hua Poan, beginning an epochal nightmare. Eyes like this had later stared coldly at Hua Poan, their owner forfeiting his own life to bring a temporary end to a horrid dream. Now, it was time for this history to be settled forever. "Are you ready?" asked Jiang Fuli. "Yes." "What you find may be extremely brutal. Can you handle it?" Light flashed before Morsi's eyes. In that bright halo, Goo Mahng was wearing a scarlet cape, as if his armor was wreathed in flames. He turned back and smiled at Morsi. The sight of those pitch-black eyes was something Morsi had scarcely dared to dream of in the past few years. "I can." Morsi took a breath. "Medicine Master Jiang, please begin the spell." The worst possible outcome would be his own death. This was Morsi's last thought before he entered the reversal stone. Chapter 191. Return to Yesteryear. Deep in the night, 3 years prior on the banks of the Fu Shui River, Morsi stood panting upon the desolate riverbank. Jiang Fuli's spell had left him dizzy, clutching the reversal stone in his sweat-slicked palms. He closed his eyes, turning his face to the cool wind. This was where the Fu Shui River wound closest to the capital. From here, one could see the city walls of Chonghua in the distance, grave and imposing, their vast shape faintly flickering in the night. The present war had yet to come. At this very moment, the emperor was instructing Mu Zhonglian to come in secret to the Fu Shui and destroy Goo Mangg's memories. Mu Zhongchuyi was still alive. Perhaps he was currently puttering over his diagram in his artificing workshop. As for Morsi himself, at this time, he would be at the northern frontier, heart full of hatred at Goo Mangg's betrayal. He hadn't even wanted to return and see Goo Mahng for himself. Pain lanced through his heart, but he had no time for self-pity. He had at most 2 hours to destroy the soul box that contained the demon blood beast's power. Only then could he change their future. Morsi had no difficulty finding the Imperial Guards charged with escorting Goo Mahng back to the city. Morsi knew Chonghua's marching patterns and the layouts of its encampment like the back of his own hand. Defenses that looked impenetrable barely slowed his steps. He quickly found the central tent where Goo Mahng was held prisoner. Casting a spell to separate the tent from the outside world, Morsi walked over to the prison barrier set around Goo Mahng and looked at him through the stripes of light like the bars of a cage. The rims of Morsi's eyes reddened at the sight. This Gu Shushong resembled an injured wolf, covered in blood as he lay curled within the prison barrier. He wore prisoner's clothes, and his disheveled hair fell around him as he slept on the dirty felt mat. Morsi slipped into the tent, unnoticed by the guards. Yet perhaps Goo Mahng wasn't sleeping very deeply, or else had some unfathomable sixth sense. Somehow, he woke up. His eyes fluttered open and he scrambled upright. Moonlight spilled through the opening at the top of the tent, and he sat up within its silvery radiance. When he saw the face of the man who had come, his eyes widened in shock. Morsi? 2 quiet syllables, yet they felt like a boulder landing in Morsi's heart. It hurt so much he couldn't breathe. What are you doing here? Morsi brushed away the barrier's light, passing through the cage forged from spellcraft, and walked into that beam of moonlight. He looked down, gazing at the prisoner half kneeling on the mat. He wanted so badly to tell Goo Mahng on behalf of his past self, the Morsi who hadn't come, "I'm sorry. I was the one who missed this chance with you." He wanted to take him away, to set him free. That way, Goo Mahng wouldn't have to endure 2 years of abuse at Luo Mei Pavilion, 3 years of suffering with his name besmirched. He wanted to kneel, to embrace that bloody Gushishong in the moonlight. He wanted to tell him, "Enough. You've already done too much. It was my fault. I hated you and loathed you, and didn't return from the northern frontier to see you. I was the only person left you could trust, but I stayed away back then and missed the chance to make everything right." But he couldn't say it. He had 2 hours and 1 chance, a chance to rewrite their destiny. Morsi closed his eyes, swallowing hard around the bitterness that flooded his throat. He knew what he should do, what he had to do, to quickly and successfully obtain that soul box. He had to take Muzhong Lian's place, do what Muzhong Lian should have done on this night, and obtain the box that held the demon blood beast's power. He suppressed a tremor in his voice and buried his emotions within the depths of his eyes. With feigned composure, he told Goo Mahng, "It was His Imperial Majesty who sent me." Goo Mahng's blue eyes flashed, then dimmed. Morsi felt his heart had been cleaved apart by a knife dipped in salt. His chest was a mess of blood and gore. He went on, his voice hoarse. He said the words that should have belonged to Muzhong Lian. "Goo Mahng, you're a traitorous turncoat." Oh my God. Goo Mahng watched him through clear blue eyes, gazing up the man who'd once been his inseparable companion, and said not a word. "His Imperial Majesty told me you wrote to him and said you used your soul to seal the power of the demon blood beast. You created a soul box, hoping to offer it to him in exchange for your life. I've come to take this box." Each word he pushed out seemed to shred his soul a little more. After the last, Morsi was momentarily incapable of going on. He lowered his gaze in silence. He couldn't stand the way Goo Mahng was looking at him. His voice was so hoarse it was barely decipherable. "Hand me the soul box. I will report this mission complete upon my return." The interior of the prison tent was terrifyingly silent. The only sounds were the wailing of the wind outside and the footsteps of the soldiers pacing back and forth on their watch. Goo Mahng still didn't hand over the soul box. "Morshudi," he said, "I didn't expect you to be the one. I thought you wouldn't be willing to see me. I thought you'd remain at the northern frontier. I didn't think you—" He lapsed into silence, but his words were like sharp needles piercing Morsi's heart. It took all of Morsi's willpower to stop himself from breaking down then. Goo Mahng sighed. "Never mind. At this point, I no longer want to dispute whatever His Imperial Majesty said. He's right. I am a traitorous turncoat. But Morshidi," he gave him a small smile, "if Suga asked you for one last favor, on behalf of our 10 years together, what would you say?" Morsi knew what Goo Mahng would ask of him, but it didn't lessen the agonizing heartbreak. After a few beats of silence, he asked, "What would you have me do?" "I can't tell you much," Goo Mahng said softly. "Some secrets are safest in my heart alone. If a second person were to know them, it would only put them in greater danger. Morsi, the Emperor is the ultimate arbiter. Even if I've done many things to disappoint you, I still want to warn you to leave yourself a way out. His Imperial Majesty isn't as trustworthy as he seems." When he saw that Morsi didn't deny it, Goo Mahng lowered his head, silently reciting an incantation. The box Mu Zhongchun later sealed and hid near the Golden Terrace appeared in Goo Mangg's palm. "This is the soul box His Imperial Majesty asked you to retrieve." According to Mu Zhonglian's tale, Goo Mahng would next tell him that this soul box could be given to His Imperial Majesty, but a key was necessary to open it. Goo Mahng would give Morsi the key and tell him to take good care of it and to destroy it when the time came. Morsi waited for Goo Mahng to speak. Once Goo Mahng asked this of him and he agreed to it, Morsi could put an end to this nightmare. He would go outside and find a place to destroy the box, and there would be a completely different ending for them all. He waited, and Goo Mahng finally spoke. "Tonight, right now, I would ask you to strip out one of my souls," he said, "and forge it into a key to reinforce the box." Morsi looked up in disbelief. "What?" Goo Mahng looked steadily back at him. "I ask you to strip out one of my souls and forge it into a key to reinforce the soul box." Morsi took a step backward. What was happening? Why were things turning out like this? What was Goo Mahng saying? In the pristine light of the moon, Goo Mahng smiled faintly. He rose from the ground. Manacles encircled his pale ankles, and his neck and wrists were chained. His long hair, inky and black, was loose, those lake blue eyes calmly meeting Morsi's own. "Morsi," Goo Mahng sighed, "I think I know where you've come from. When you came in, I thought you'd come—" I knew. "I thought you'd come from the northern frontier, but I couldn't be sure. And then I saw how shocked you were just now. That's when I knew. You're not the Morsi who rushed here from the northern frontier, but the General Mo who's come from the future." Morsi's eyes flew wide, a tempestuous sea surging within them. How could you—" The chains around Goo Mangg's ankles clanked. That thin, pale-faced prisoner stepped up to Morsi and raised his eyes, examining Morsi's face. "How could I know? When you look at me, there's no hatred in your eyes, only sadness. So you're the little shirdi who figured out some way to come back after I chose to sacrifice myself, right?" The pain of it hit Morsi in the softest, most sensitive piece of his heart. He turned away, but his tears could no longer be restrained, streaming down his face in his shock. "How could you—" Sobs crowded out the rest. "Dummy, don't cry. It's my fault. I've known for ages that such a day would come." Goo Mahng reached out his fettered hands, gently cupping Morsi's face. "Morsi, I was the one who let you down. All my days I've wanted to bring you into my life, but I've known for a long time when I would choose to die, when my soul would shatter. I couldn't bear to take you with me." Morsi turned, his gaze burning, yet sheened with tears. "How could you know that? You're simply a specter from the past. I came back so that I could change this ending." "Because when I shared minds and merged souls with the demon blood beast," Goo Mahng pointed to his own blue eyes, "I fell gravely ill for 7 days, never once waking. The demon beast has the ability to foresee its own death. When I merged with it, I saw my future sacrifice. I dreamed other prophetic dreams, and I dreamed of today. I saw you, coming from the future with the reversal stone, believing you could change it all. But nothing can actually be changed." "What?" "Impossible," Morsi cried. Goo Mahng shook his head. "Morsi, the reversal stone has no power to change destiny. That's what the ancient records meant when they said it inflicts no harm upon the world, as fate has already been written. There's no way to easily change the past. The 3 forbidden techniques are forbidden because if such changes were truly effected, the consequence might be the collapse of the mortal world. This reversal stone is said to possess the power to change the lives and deaths of so many mortals, with no price paid. How can this be?" His words were like cold ice filling up Morsi's insides. Even Morsi's fingertips were trembling. How? Before you came, I thought maybe my dream was wrong, said Goo Mahng. But now I see it wasn't wrong at all. Morsi looked up, light flickering madly in his eyes, deeply sorrowful yet wild and nearly insane. Then why did Jiangfu Li hand the stone to me? He has Chuntang's memories. Did he not know how the stone should be used? Morsi, Medicine Master Jiang must have known precisely what the result would be when he gave you the reversal stone. But if he told you the truth, if he told you to take this stone and return to the past in order to personally cut off my soul and forge it into a key, would you have agreed? No, Morsi reflected. He would never have done it. There was no way he would have agreed. Goo Mahng smiled, an expression filled with sorrow. The reversal stone's true name is the Stone of Destiny. When the world was created, destiny was written, and the laws of the universe and karmic balance came to be. But that act of creation was too monumental, and even the gods can make mistakes. Thus, they left several such stones on Earth. These stones would transport their bearer to the past, supposedly allowing them to change the future. But in reality, that's a lie. Those who use them to return to the past merely complete tasks that, according to fate, they should have done at that time, but didn't. You were no exception. Morsi, you came from the future thinking to change the past, but your fate is already written by the heavens. You'll inevitably complete the task entrusted to you by Jiangfu Li and use my soul to forge a key. That is the destiny the stone seeks to mend. Morsi's blood felt like ice in his veins. His lips trembled. He wanted to say, "You're wrong. It's not supposed to be like this. You're the one who doesn't understand the reversal stone. It's not Jiangfu Li who lied to me." But as he gazed into Goo Mahng's eyes, he knew in the depths of his heart that what he said was all true. Indeed, if a stone could really change the world and reverse the order of the universe, why would it require divination and the guidance of a hexagram? Why would the stone only be handed over to a fated person to return an equally fated time? The stone couldn't rewrite destiny at all. It could only mend a past error within a certain loop of time. Morsi couldn't speak. The weight of his emotions was too much. He strained beneath them until he could bear it no longer. Grief crashed down upon him. When you returned to this city missing 2 mortal souls, with your mind broken, I always thought the people who hurt you were the Liao Kingdom, that they had gouged out your souls. But in truth, he wept plaintively, like an abandoned dog, raising scarlet eyes to stare at Goo Mahng. He threw his head back and laughed, a mad, hysterical sound. But in truth, it was me. Goo Mahng closed his eyes. This is my fate. Tonight, Mu Zhonglian will come looking for you. In my time. He told me he found you covered in blood and on the verge of death. He thought your interrogations went too far with their torture. But that's not true. I did it myself. Before he came, I had gouged out your soul. I completed this fate this stone gave to us. Isn't that right? Morsi, what do you all take me for? What do the heavens take me for? You can see the future. You've dreamed prophetic dreams. Did you ever dream of how I felt when you died with the demonic beast and left me? I couldn't cry, couldn't lose my composure, couldn't mourn. I couldn't even recover your body. Voice breaking, Morsi took hold of Goo Mahng's hand and pressed it to his chest. Goo Mahng, I'm a living person too. Did you foresee what this would do to me? Morsi lowered his head, tears falling. Oh my God. I'm sorry. Morsi lowered his head, tears falling like rain. For as long as Goo Mahng had known him, his little Shudi had never cried so piteously, as if his tears were wrung out of his body. Goo Mahng's own feelings were complicated. He didn't know how to cross this chasm of fate, to nullify this pain. There was nothing they could change in the end. He too wished it didn't have to be Morsi doing it. He wished he could create this key himself, but his spiritual core was broken beyond repair. He couldn't do it. He stepped forward and embraced Shee, who had come from the battlefields 3 years later. Shee, who had already lost his Goo Mahng. He held him, feeling the exhaustion, despair, and helplessness that radiated from his body. To him, the Empire's General Moa had always been that kind youth sitting alone beneath a birch tree, who had been beaten for giving a pair of slave siblings money for food. He'd wanted to protect him for a lifetime, yet in the end, Goo Mahng had protected everyone on Earth. It was Shee alone he'd let down. Shishong. When Shee spoke again, his tone had lost its edge, sounding dull and muted, as if a raging blaze had burned its brightest and suddenly snuffed out. I didn't come back to fulfill my fate, to hurt you, said Shee, voice hollow. I know. In the future, I've already lost you. Shee choked up, doubling over like that defenseless youth from bygone days who'd been stripped of all his support. His words were almost unintelligible. I don't want to lose you again in the past. I know, Shee, I'm sorry. Why must it be me? When he heard him cry like a trapped beast, Goo Manh's tears, too, began to fall. He held his moisture tightly, his tears silently soaking Shee's clothes. Why would fate choose Shee? To tell it true, both of them understood perfectly. Shee was the person Goo Mahng trusted most. He was the only person who would listen to Goo Mahng, who would be able to complete this final act of cruelty. Without the key, soon after this soul box was handed over to the Emperor, he would attain the power of the demon blood beast. They wouldn't even have a few years before the 9 provinces came to chaos. The person who knew Goo Mahng best, the person most like him, was Shee. Goo Mahng had once said, "Some things must be done, some sacrifices must be made. When fate comes knocking, you have to face it if you don't want to be a coward. We all have our paths to walk." This was the path they had to take, the final stretch. Resentment, dissatisfaction, suffering. None of these could override the clear-sighted awareness of what they must do. It was carved into their bones. Not since the day they enlisted in the army, since the day they became generals, could they extricate themselves from the bonds of their duty. General Goo was General Goo, not a traitor, and General Moa was no coward. Those who became commanders possessed no earth-shaking power or military glory. There were only a series of burdens placed before them, burdens they had to pick up even if the pain destroyed them. This was what it meant to be a general. Do what the reversal stone needs you to do, Shee, Goo Mahng murmured. I know the place you've come from is already a sea of blood, but I believe you haven't seen its conclusion yet. If that's how the world ends, why would the stone of destiny bring you back here to repair this bit of fate? He comforted him, just as he had when they charged into battle in the past. Though they knew nothing of what the future might bring, he consoled and encouraged him. Where General Goo was, there was fire and there was a light. His warmth was enough to make others feel this wasn't the end. There will come a turn for the better. But will that turn still have you in it? Shee mumbled, his eyes vacant. Goo Mahng fell silent. Have you foreseen it? Shee rasped. Goo Mahng released Shee's hand and stood before him, solemn. There's a dream I've had over and over again. But just like how I couldn't be sure my visions were real before I saw you, I can't be sure if this one is foresight, or if it's because I've missed you too much. Goo Mahng heaved a long sigh. He seemed to pour everything into his next words, as if to give Shee all the brightness and love he ever possessed, to smooth over his scarred and wounded heart. His blue eyes glimmered softly with tears. I dreamed the war was won, and then it rained. In that rain, I found you. Perhaps he had found a thread of hope, or perhaps he merely longed for the barest hint of comfort. Shee gazed into those clear blue eyes and asked, as if in a dream, What happened then? I said to you, let's go home. Morsi's lips trembled, tears gathering again in his eyes. He lowered his gaze, blinking slowly. Then the rain stopped, and we went home. The two of them were alike in this too. Neither dared believe this most beautiful dream was truly a premonition. In the future, Goo Mahng had already lost his life. Yet a flicker of courage flared in Morsi's heart. Such was his love for Goo Mahng that he was willing to take the slightest spark of hope for a blazing wildfire. Morsi asked hungrily, a sorrowful plea. And in the end, you and I were never parted again. A warm smile bloomed over Goo Mahng's gaunt face. He reached out, interlocking his fingers with Morsi's. As long as it's not the end, there's still hope. After I sacrificed myself, you never imagined I would speak to you again and hold your hand like this. Isn't that right? Morsi, no matter what happens, you've never been willing to admit defeat. I'm no different. I know you also hold compassion for the people and place the needs of the nation first. We've always shared the same goal, so do as the reversal stone wishes. As he spoke, he stood on his tiptoes and gently kissed Morsi on the lips. In life or in death, I'll love you forever. You'll always make me proud. Okay, y'all. Unfortunately, that's all I can read today. It's literally the morning. I'm about to listen really, really quickly before I upload it. I can't. I absolutely cannot with Volume 7. Where is my hope? I mean, I already did not have any hope for real when Jiang Li mentioned the things that he mentioned in Volume 6. Like, I didn't even want to dare have hope. And I don't. Like, but the audacity for even Mudong Chu Yi to be mentioned. And it's not going to happen. And then for Goo Mahng to say all of this crap, that all of this was predestined, blah, blah, blah. It's not going to change anything. And then to find out that it's Morsi. Morsi is the one who took his soul. Okay. At this point, I'm beyond like hurt and devastated. I'm pissed right now. I am legitimately pissed. And I'm specifically pissed at Meatbun because what the hell are you doing to me? Like, what are you doing to your readers? We are literally on the 7th volume. And you mean to tell me that the reason why Morsi went back with this whole reversal stone, it's not even a freaking reversal? Nothing can change? I'm so upset right now. Like, and then like, I can't even, okay. All of my hope is genuinely lost right now. I'm so pissed off because like, even on the last page of this chapter where, you know, he's like, I had the premonition, but I'm not sure if it was just because I miss you. And Morsi's like, what happened? And he said, I said, let's go home. And then the rain stopped and we went home and we never parted again. I don't trust this shit. Like, not at all. Because that could easily be like a dream. You know, it could be like, okay, maybe he did see him. But it was in the freaking afterlife. At this point, I'm like, what? Do both of the generals die? And that's how they get to be together forever? Fuck. Oh my God. And then for Goo Mahng to say, like, I know you also hold compassion for the people and place the needs of the nation first. Honestly, I'm not even sure if that's true. Like, we know that in Goo Mahng's eyes, the nation is just as important as Morsi, which honestly, it said that, but I'm willing to bet that the nation is more important than Morsi, because as he said, he's protected the nation and everything, and Morsi was the only one that he truly let down. On page 37, he had protected everyone on Earth except Morsi. You know, meanwhile, I think Morsi cares about Goo Mahng more than everything, more than the nation. Like, I think he may do certain things because he knows what his duty is, but I believe he cares about Goo Mahng more than the fucking nation. I can't. I just can't. Like, I'm so Yo, I am exhausted, okay? This series has emotionally exhausted me. And I really, really, like, at this point, I don't have hope, but I need things to turn around because I cannot do this. I love angst so much, but this is too much. Is that okay for me to say? Like, this is too much? Like, I'm to the point now where I am legitimately upset with the author and I don't want to read this volume. Like, I don't want to read anymore because I have no assurance of hope that things are going to end well. Okay. I'm not going to say anything else. I think, honestly, for the remainder of this book, my thoughts at the end are probably going to be minimal because I don't want to talk. If I have like a frustration or something, I may get that out, but I'm not saying anything. And we'll just see. I'm probably not going to do a full recap of Volume 7. It's probably going to be us discussing the overall, how like Volume 7 concluded everything, and then we can just talk about my favorite aspects, my least favorite aspects, my favorite and least favorite characters, my favorite quotes and stuff like that of the series in its entirety so that we can be done. Because at this point, I am pissed and I just want to be done. I'm not even gonna lie. Like, I want to read because I want to know how this ends, but I don't want to read anymore. Like, I am thoroughly upset, and that's it. I'm gonna keep reading, and for Patreoners, we will be having a live reading session October the 18th at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, 7 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Everyone is getting this first reading of the volume today, so Patreon and YouTube, you all are getting it at the same time since we took so many days break. And after today's video, then everything will be 48 hours in advance, blah, blah, blah. You guys, we do have our celebration coming up this Sunday on the 19th. So it's still not too late to submit art. If anyone would like to, please, if you submit art, let me know if your images, your paintings, your drawings, whatever, if they have titles, give me the title. Give me your artist name. If you want people to know who you are, please give me your handles that you use on social media. Please let me know who the characters are, just in case I'm unsure. And yeah, I guess that's all I have to say. I'll be giving you guys an update, I guess, when I have a better projection of when we will finish the novel, on when exactly we will do this recap and discussion over the entire series. You guys have a good day and night. Well, I mean.